Welcome back my channel. Recently, Indonesia joined BRICS, but what does it mean for our daily life in Indonesia? Today, we will see not only our economy, but also national defense issues. Are you ready?
Okay, so today we're looking at Indonesia joining BRICS.
Yeah.
Is it going to be a big deal for the global south? I mean, it sounds like it could be. We've got articles, expert opinions, even some economic simulations here. So where do we even begin?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because Indonesia is not just like testing the waters with BRICS. They're going all in. It's actually the first Southeast Asian nation to join them. So now BRICS represents like 40% of the global population.
40%. Okay. Wow, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
But beyond the numbers, what does this actually mean for Indonesia? Like one article mentioned this potential wave of new investments. Is that realistic or is that just hype?
I mean, the potential's there, but it's not quite that simple. You know, in 2024, Indonesia's trade with BRICS nations was already at $150 billion. So being a member just opens up even more markets, especially for things that aren't oil and gas. Like think about palm oil. That's huge for Indonesia, and there's a massive market for it in India. Or rubber, China needs a ton of that.
So it's not just like economic growth in some vague sense. We're talking about specific Indonesian industries actually benefiting. Now, something else that really stood out to me in all this research was this new development bank, the NDB. Can you break that down for us? Why is that so important for Indonesia?
So the NDB is kind of like the BRICS' own financial powerhouse.
Right.
And they're all about funding these big infrastructure projects, which is perfect for Indonesia. They've got all these ambitious plans in the works, new ports, even a whole new capital city. I mean, these are mega projects. They need mega funding. And the NDB could be a way to get that without all the restrictions that usually come with traditional Western lenders.
So less red tape and maybe more control over how they develop. I can see why Indonesia would be into that. But let's be real for a second. They're playing a dangerous game here. Can they really get closer to BRICS without making the West unhappy?
That's the billion-dollar question. Even their former president, Jokowi, he was really careful about joining BRICS. He was super protective of Indonesia's free and active foreign policy.
Right. No playing favorites, no picking sides in these global power struggles. Indonesia's always been the diplomatic cool kid, especially in ASEAN. So is this a sign that things are changing? Are they switching sides?
It definitely signals something shifting. Some analysts are even calling it a step towards a multipolar world, where the global south has more of a voice. It's like imagine instead of one sun in the solar system, you've got multiple planets with their own gravitational pull.
Okay, that's a pretty good picture. So what does that world actually look like? And where does Indonesia fit in all of this?
Think about a world where the G7 and the IMF aren't the only ones calling the shots. You've got organizations like BRICS and the NDB stepping up. They're offering other ways to develop and have influence globally. And Indonesia, with their location, their growing economy, their diplomacy skills, they could become a major player in shaping this new landscape.
So they're not just joining a club. They want to be a power broker in this new world order. That's ambitious. But let's be honest, there have to be risks involved, right?
Oh, absolutely. One worry is becoming too reliant on BRICS economies, especially China. Some critics are saying it could be a debt trap if Indonesia borrows too much from the NDB. There's also the risk of upsetting Western allies, which could lead to them pulling back on investments and trade. That would be a big blow to what Indonesia is trying to do.
So they're dancing with multiple partners, but stepping on toes could really mess things up. That's a lot to handle, even for the best diplomats. But what about within BRICS itself? It's not exactly a united front, is it?
You're right, they're not all on the same page. There's already a tension, especially between China and India. Those are two giants with their own plans, so Indonesia's going to have to deal with that while also trying to find some common ground.
Sounds like a high-stakes juggling act. But wait, we haven't even talked about the elephant in the room, the South China Sea. How does that factor into Indonesia's defense strategy, especially with China being such a key player in BRICS?
Yeah, the South China Sea is a real powder keg, and this just adds another layer of complexity because China's been flexing its muscles there, even in areas that overlap with Indonesia's territory. That doesn't really scream brotherhood, right? And remember those reports of Chinese ships going into Indonesian waters? That's a sign of the friction that could happen.
Yeah, not exactly a picture of harmony among BRICS nations. So how's Indonesia going to deal with this? They're going to have to choose a side.
It's a balancing act for sure. On the one hand, they want to use those BRICS partnerships to strengthen their defenses, maybe get access to advanced military tech from Russia or China, maybe even joint military exercises. But they also don't want to provoke China, their biggest trading partner, or set off the U.S.
So they're trying to show strength without starting a fight. That's a tough line to walk. But how do they actually do that? What are they doing specifically?
Well, they've been increasing their naval presence in the Natuna Islands. Those are right on the edge of the disputed waters.
Yeah.
And they're doing joint patrols with the U.S. and Australia, which sends a pretty clear message that they're not backing down.
Those are some bold moves, given what could happen with China.
Yeah.
But they're also trying to work things out diplomatically, right?
Exactly. President Perales signed several cooperation agreements with China on things like infrastructure and trade. So it's a two-pronged approach, engagement and deterrence.
A bit of a good cop, bad cop routine, trying to walk that fine line between cooperation and confrontation. But can they keep that up long term?
I mean, that's the question, isn't it? It all depends on how BRICS itself changes how China and the West interact, and of course what happens politically inside Indonesia. It's a lot of moving pieces.
So it's not just choppy waters, they're trying to chart a whole new course. One report even said they're aiming to be a bridge between BRICS and the West. Like they're even trying to join the OECD. Isn't that usually for developed countries? Can they actually do that?
It's definitely bold. It does fit with that free and active foreign policy, though.
Right.
They're not picking a team. They're trying to make all their relationships work for Indonesia. It's like a really high-stakes chess game, trying to outmaneuver everyone.
But can you really play both sides and win? Won't they eventually have to choose?
Some analysts think, yeah, as BRICS gets more powerful and the West feels more threatened, Indonesia's going to have to pick a side. Others say being this bridge builder will become even more important in a multipolar world.
So they're betting big, hoping they can stay flexible and come out on top. But let's zoom out for a second. What does all this mean for the global South in general? Is Indonesia leading the way toward a new world order?
It's definitely a sign that the global South is getting more assertive, looking for alternatives to those traditional Western institutions. And Indonesia's not the only one. Countries like Malaysia and Thailand, they're thinking about BRICS too.
So a domino effect.
Yeah.
More countries joining the BRICS bandwagon. Would that really change things that much?
Too early to say for sure. But there's this feeling that the balance of power is shifting, and that's making some in the West pretty nervous. You know, when former President Trump threatened those 100% tariffs on BRICS countries if they messed with the dollar, that shows you how seriously they're taking this.
Wow, yeah, high stakes indeed. But what about the average person in the global South? Will their lives actually get better if BRICS becomes this dominant force?
Well, that's the hope, right? People who support BRICS, they say this focus on South-South cooperation will mean better trade deals, more investment in infrastructure, easier access to technology for developing countries. Imagine a world where developing countries have more control over their resources, more power on the global stage.
That sounds pretty good, especially for countries that have always felt sidelined. But is there any reason to be skeptical?
Of course, critics say BRICS is just another power grab, and that all this talk about a fairer world order is just talk. They say it's just a new set of players, but the game's still the same.
So not a guaranteed win for the global South. Could be a step forward, could be the same old thing with a new name.
Exactly. And don't forget, BRICS is still pretty new. There are tensions inside conflicting interests, and they don't really agree on a lot of things.
So a work in progress, but one that could really shake things up.
Absolutely. And Indonesia joining shows they want to be part of that change, to help shape the future, not just for the global South, but maybe for everyone.
Okay, so we've talked big picture economics diplomacy. But what does all this mean for the actual people of Indonesia? How will their lives be affected?
That's the key question, right? It's easy to get lost in the geopolitics and forget about the human side. Being in BRICS could mean more jobs, especially in manufacturing infrastructure technology. The NDB investing in social development could mean better education and healthcare.
So maybe a better quality of life for a lot of Indonesians. That's something people can understand.
Yeah, but it's not a given. It depends on how well the government handles all this. Can they balance everyone's interests? Can they avoid the corruption that sometimes comes with these big development projects?
So high hopes, but also some potential problems.
Yeah.
It's a risky path, but with potentially big rewards. It sounds like Indonesia's taking on a huge challenge.
They are, and the whole world is watching to see what happens.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Economics, diplomacy, security, the impact on the global South. But there's one piece missing. What about Indonesia's new president, Prabowo Subianto?
He's a major player in this. It was his call to join BRICS, a pretty different approach from his predecessor.
Right. Jokowi seemed hesitant about BRICS, worried about upsetting the West. But Trudeau seems to have a different idea.
He does. He's always been pushing for a stronger foreign policy, one where Indonesia is really front and center on the world stage. And he sees BRICS as a way to do that.
So it's about national pride, about wanting Indonesia to be a major player. Is that it?
Partly, yeah. But there's also strategy and economics involved. He thinks BRICS gives Indonesia more leverage when dealing with the West, better access to resources, and markets more influence on the global stage.
So it's about national interest, about making sure Indonesia has a good future in a world that's always changing. But how does this fit with his plans for Indonesia itself?
Well, his domestic agenda is all about economic development and jobs. He's promised to boost growth, improve infrastructure, create millions of jobs.
And he sees BRICS as a way to keep those promises.
Exactly. He thinks being in BRICS will attract foreign investment, stimulate trade, create opportunities for Indonesian businesses and workers.
But we talked about the risks too. Economic dependence on China, upsetting Western allies, navigating the complexities within BRICS. Are those concerns even bigger with Prabowo in charge?
Yeah, they are. He's a controversial figure, a former general with a past that includes accusations of human rights abuses from his time in the military.
So a leader with a complicated history making a bold move on the world stage. That's a recipe for both hope and uncertainty.
It is, and this is just the beginning. It's how Prabowo handles all these competing forces, how he manages the opportunities and challenges that will have a huge impact, not just on Indonesia, maybe on the world.
It's like watching a political thriller play out in real time.
And we'll be here to break it all down right here on the Deep Dive. But before we wrap up, let's bring it back to you, the listener.
Okay, so what does this all mean for Indonesia, the global south, and for you?
It is. And the effects could go way beyond Indonesia. Just think, one article you sent talked about what this could mean for global commodity markets. You know, Indonesia is a big producer of stuff like palm oil, rubber nickel. All those things are essential for industries all over the world.
So if being in BRICS boosts Indonesia's production and trade of those commodities, could that mess with global supply chains?
Exactly. Increased demand from BRICS nations could make prices go up and down, which would affect businesses and consumers everywhere. It just shows that even economic stuff happening far away can really impact things closer to home.
And speaking of closer to home, let's think about you, the listener. What are some key takeaways from Indonesia's BRICS move?
Well, first, it shows how much the global landscape is changing, right? Those old power structures are being challenged, new alliances are popping up. It's important to stay informed and be able to adapt. You got to recognize that the world is in constant motion.
So no more complacency. We got to stay on our toes.
Yeah. Right. Second, Indonesia's story shows how important it is to understand how everything's connected. You know, economic decisions made in Jakarta can have a ripple effect across global markets. They can impact businesses and consumers thousands of miles away. We're all part of this complex web, and we have to understand those connections.
We're not just individuals out there. We're all part of this big global system.
Exactly. And finally, Indonesia going all in on BRICS is a good example of risk and opportunity. They're aiming for more economic success and more influence globally. But they also have to deal with potential problems, like becoming too reliant on certain partners and alienating others. Whether they succeed or fail will be a valuable lesson for other countries thinking about making similar moves.
It's like a real-time experiment in global strategy.
Yeah.
And we all have front row seats.
That's right. So keep your eyes on Indonesia. Their BRICS journey is just starting, and the results, both good and bad, will continue to shape the global landscape for years to come.
All right, so there you have it. We've looked at Indonesia's BRICS move from every angle, the economic potential, the diplomatic maneuvering, the security implication, the potential impact on the global south. We even talked about what it means for you, the listener, and how it shows how interconnected our world really is.
It's been a fascinating deep dive, exploring a really important moment in global affairs. And as always, it reminds us that staying curious, informed, and engaged is crucial for navigating our constantly changing world.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into the issues that shape our world. We'll be here to guide you along the way.